Yeah, and I love talking to the young ones about music, and I mean the new generation that are still Alice Cooper fans are listening to Alice Cooper for the first time, that, as well as all the fans that have been loyal for so many years, decades, and then the new ones. That's the one thing I love about the internet. I don't love everything about the internet, but the fact that so many genres of music, since the time of recording music began, in the late 1800s. Thank you, Thomas Edison. That there's so many styles to listen to, and yeah, the popular music is always great. But then there'll be somebody that I talked to who said, all the years of my whole life I've been following you and I love you, and all the 12 years I've been living on, I'm 12 years old. The guy's, the kid's 12 years old and he loves the Killer album, and I've scored schools out. Like, I mean, to me, that's the most impressive thing, and the one thing I love about the internet. Very cool.
Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very honored to welcome legendary drummer Neal Smith. You were original member of Alice Cooper's band, weren't you?
Well, it wasn't Alice Cooper's band at that time. It was our band. All five of us: Glenn Buxton, Dennis Dunaway, Mike Bruce, Vince Fournier, and me, Neal Smith. And about 6 months after I joined the Naz, we changed the name, uh, March 16th, 1968, from the Naz to Alice Cooper. And yes, I was part of the five founding members of the Alice Cooper band.
Well, you've got an album out now which has a country flavor to it. That's a little different step than what we're used to hearing. And what I found intriguing about the album, it wasn't just country music, it was different styles of country music. I heard, the country blues, the rockin' country, the kind of stuff you'd hear on Smokey and the Bandit, that kind of stuff. What took you in that direction?
Exactly. Well, as a songwriter, and especially as a musician, also, growing up, I had a lot of different influences, and I heard a lot of different styles of music, all the way from theme songs from movies to Broadway theme songs to rock. Of course, it was happening in the late '50s and early '60s, and my mother was a big swing fan, big Glenn Miller fan. So there was always that type of music playing as well. But she also liked live music. And in the Midwest, in north central Ohio, Akron, the area that I'm from, there were some country ballrooms, and they had great country bands with fiddles and accordions, piano players. And this one place in particular, Fixer's Ballroom, when I was about 14 or 15 years old, just started learning snare drum at that time, and actually been playing it for a while. But I guess I found out early on that I was not an exhibitionist, but I wasn't afraid of large crowds, and I was really good at the dance. The popular dance at the time um, was the mashed potato, and so I had put on. At that time I had different phases in my life, and being in the Midwest and in near Cleveland and Detroit and Pittsburgh, I was pretty much a greaser back in those days. And I had my hair combed up, and I had the little waterfall in the front and ducktails in the back. And I had on some white patent leather pointed loafers. They were the most badass loafers I could have as a 13, 14-year old. And the band that we're talking about, the great band, they had a blind piano player, and his name was Clarence, and they were a great country western band and played all sorts of music and square dance, all kinds of things. But they fiddle player, accordion, guitar, upright bass, and they did a really great rendition of Sarah song, the Orange Blossom Special.
Oh, yeah.
And as you know, that song goes from very slow at the beginning to very fast at the end. And by the end of the song, which could be 4 or 5, 6 minutes long, the band's still playing, at a fever pitch, and I was the only one on the dance floor still doing the mashed potatoes to the Orange Blossom Special. So I wasn't a shy kid at all, and I took that right on stage when we played. When I finally started playing rock music, but that was part of the inspiration. My father was also my mother and father were divorced before he started elementary school, but I saw him all the time in his record collection. He had some Johnny Cash songs. "Ring of Fire" is one that I remember, and so and it was always Frankie Lane with Rawhide, the movies and the TV show, and all the great westerns in the '50s that were on TV and the movies. Um, and I love that as much as the monster movies and everything that inspired the Alice Cooper group. I loved all of that storytelling, and Johnny Horton, who had North to Alaska, the Battle of New Orleans, and all these great storytelling songs. And again, over time, I went through a rough divorce in 1980, and shortly after that, I wrote a song called "Coffee, Beer, and Borrowed Time," which lent itself to more of a country feel. And I just kind of shelved it because I didn't have anything I've ever written that's in that vein. And over time, so since then, once in a while there'd be a song that comes along. Kind of could be like "Pulling Out Smoking" was another one in the '90s. "Evil Wind," and then I I started saying, well, maybe I could use that. I'm not a Southern rock. This isn't Southern rock by any stretch of the imagination, in my opinion. But it has like a Midwest Western kind of appeal to it, a country flair, and so I collected 10 songs and said, what the hell? I spent 7 years ago, I bought a winter home in Arizona. That's where the band's from. The history of Arizona as the 48th state, the last state in the Union on the mainland, it has great history. It was always the rebel state. It was the last one. It was the last wild territory that became a state. So I wanted to have that kind of spirit, which is not unlike Desperado on the Killer album or Raped and Freezing on the Million Dollar Baby album, giving way and recognizing kind of a salute to our heritage in the great Southwest and the Western cultures all the way, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. And so that was, I started aiming the lyrics toward that. Then I needed a little sweetening. I got some country guitar. Arlen Roth, who was a great country guitar player. And then Gary Orlander had a little bit of country fiddle to like 3 or 4 songs. And it started to, I said, I'll just call it Goes West. KillSmith Goes West. And it's dipping my fingers in that little bit of Western spirit that I'm very, very accustomed to. And it's a Western, it's a little bit of a rebel spirit. But I have some great characters in it. Tattooed Cowgirl, Jukebox Rose, who are kind of, Thelma and Louise kind of gals that are a little over the top. But it just started to come together. And when you have a theme like that, you can sort of target your lyrics to that direction. And that's exactly what I did. And I have some songs in it kind of old Western feel from the late 1800s, some maybe from the 50s, and then some a little more modern songs like "Big Wheels Rolling West," but still have that storytelling, the dream to go west young man. In this case, he's an 18-wheeler truck driver. And so just a great variety. Once I go in a direction, the songs almost write themselves. So that's what happened with this, and I put it. I know it's a little bit different. I've seen people that were kind of like, oh boy, a country album from Neal Smith, and I'm going, well, you really have to listen to it before you just make a quick judgment like that. And the reviews and the response have really been good, and a lot of people are surprised. Like, if you listen to it yourself, there's a song or two that you enjoy off of it, and they're pretty much all on through CD Baby. They're all on YouTube now, all the KillSmith Goes West 10 songs, and I'm slowly putting, doing my own little interpretation of them also, and putting them on CD Baby, but getting good reviews, good fan response, and the next album will probably be nothing like this, but I'll find something else to play around with.
Yeah. When you go in different directions like that, do you worry that people are like gonna just stop listening to you, or are you just like, I'm going for it?
Well, there'd always be I mean, like Pulling Out Smoking and Evil Wind are still two pretty heavy rock songs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in my DNA. And no matter what style of music I ever work with, there'll always be a group of songs. They're all basically rock songs. And most music is rock. And so much of the country, as you know today, when I don't want to say rock is dead, because I mean, in my mind, it's never dead.
Oh
But
no.
popularity wise, it's basically rap, hip hop, and country are the most commercial musics right now, and and I understand that. But uh, when you're a professional musician, you go where the money is, and a lot of the great musicians that are out there are in Nashville or in Memphis, recording the country songs. These are rock musicians playing these, and the rock producers the same thing. They've gone
Mm-hmm.
there, and you listen to them, and all it is, it's rock with a country twang to it. And so, I mean, that's what I tried. With the foundation is always rock, and a ballad, it's always a thin line. Is that ballad going to be well like a rock ballad, or it can be like a country ballad? And I have two of them, Sunsets of Gold and the Shaughnessy Highway, and two completely different topics. But again, it's the treatment. Put a fiddle, country guitar on it, and boom! All of a sudden, it's country. If I had a real screaming guitar, like Queen or something, and then it becomes rock. So if it sounds like Brian May, so it just depends on the treatment of the song, and I already have 9 songs written for the new album. I think I have a good idea of the 10th one, and it'll be I can't really say what I'm just starting to mix it now, and a lot of it has to do with how you mix an album as well. So it'll be a lot more rocking, more traditionally what I do. But no, I'm very happy. I got it's not getting it out of my system, but when as a songwriter, it's fun to write in different directions, but put the same emotion, the same energy and creativity in no matter what you do.
A lot of different creators like Kid Rock have done songs quite similar to that, and
Mm-hmm.
they've all worked out good. Man, I've listened to the whole album, and I hear stuff I could probably hear Jerry Reed doing, or uh,
Yeah,
even Hank Williams, or there's different styles. So I really appreciate how you stuck to country, but you didn't just stick to a certain sound.
right. And I think and that would be the biggest compliment for me if somebody took one of the songs, a real country artist would take one of the songs and do their treatment to it and make it a mega hit. That wouldn't bug me either.
I bet not. Well, when I was growing up, it was my grandfather who introduced me to country music, and he had, Hank Williams Sr.,
Yeah.
Tennessee Ernie Ford. I remember listening to Tom T. Hall. You remember Sneaky Snake?
Boy, I should know that one, shouldn't I? But I don't. I have to look it up. That's a great title.
Yeah, Tom T. Hall, Sneaky Snake. That was my favorite as a kid.
Oh, that's cool. I like it.
But that's how I learned to appreciate country music, and then of course when I'd go spend the weekends, I think it was Saturday nights, we were watching Hee Haw.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Roy Clark. I mean, see again, I'm a song person, and if
Mm-hmm.
no matter what style or genre a song's in, I mean, there's even been some great, early rap and hip hop songs that when they fuse with rock and they have amazing hooks. There's been some great ones over the last 20 or 30 years, but so it to me it's the song, not the style that it's written in,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what again what inspires me is to take what I consider a pretty good song, and then just kind of twist it into that style. But yeah, I mean, Roy Clark. I mean, I think I saw him one time, and Glenn Campbell jamming on Hee Haw. Oh my God! I
Mm-hmm.
mean, those guys. I mean, let's face it, the greatest guitar players before rock were Chet Atkins were in country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's sort of the springboard. You know, blues and country was the spring and jazz for modern rock music. And so if I am inspired by that, and I can write a song that I think is a pretty good song, that's the most important thing. Again, bottom line, do you enjoy the song? And that's really more my biggest goal, is to have a good song, and then the style it's in. Like I said, you can form it once you have the idea of what you want to do, which is kind of what what you're mentioning. And believe me, there's some great songs all the way back to Hank Williams, and just in the lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
the simple lyrics that you just go, that's so simple, nobody would have thought of it, but they're amazing. Hank Williams was a genius at that.
Oh
Oh
my
man,
God, yeah.
yeah, he was great.
And you named two of probably the best guitar players when Roy Clark and Glenn
Okay,
Campbell.
yeah, yeah,
And and Glenn Campbell, I mean, he played on a lot of rock albums through the
yeah.
years too. I mean, what he worked with the Beach Boys, and
Yes, exactly. Yep. Yep.
he was ahead of his time.
Oh yeah, when he's burning, and Roy Clark's burning, they're going back and forth. You just sit there and you go, "Oh my God!" I mean, it's like it's like Jeff Beck and Jimi Hendrix, but in country instead of like rock. And they are amazing. Once they're doing their licks, they could be any style of music at all, man, because they're just so unbelievable. They're great. They are great.
Yeah, but Buck Owens was my favorite artist back then.
Yeah, no,
There's
he was
something
great
about
too,
Buck,
man.
man.
Yeah. Well, that was back when I moved to Arizona in '63. All of those shows were on, on TV out there, and I didn't watch them religiously because the Beach Boys were happening, and Big California Sound was in the Southwest, and then obviously right after that the British invasion. But it was all coming at me at one time, all this great music. And again, I was in the song. If it's a great song, I didn't care if it's country, I didn't care if it was rock, didn't care if it was California surf. No, the great songs always seem to rise to the top.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that. My collection, I've got everything from metal to country. I
Yeah.
even listen to Tom Jones.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things after I bought the Rolls, after we did the Schools Out tour in the UK in '72, I bought a Rolls Royce and brought it back to our home in Greenwich, Connecticut, our mansion. And when I get bored, and when we were getting ready to do the $1 Billion Baby tour, I just drive around Greenwich, and I had two CDs that I would play in the cassette player of my Rolls Royce, my Silver Cloud, and one of them was James Bond's greatest hits. And at that time, there weren't many, but they all were great songs in the early '70s. But then Andy Williams' greatest hits. It was just so mellow, so laid back, but so melodic and so relaxing to listen to. Was so Moon River. I mean, just and if you listen to that song carefully, it ain't a love song. And uh, it's a great album. Matter of fact, I just bought the CD version of it about a year ago. I haven't listened to it yet, but it's hard for me to listen to music when I'm putting an album together. I don't want to be inspired or you know think about other songs. But those were the two I played. Drive around Greenwich in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with a 6 pack of cold beer and listening to my tunes, and nobody on the road. The police knew me. I'd wave at them and go by.
I've been known to blare Neil Sedaka every once in a while. So
He's great. He was at the Hall of Fame with us. He got inducted with us in 2011. Oh no, not Neil Sedaka. It was the other Neil Diamond.
oh, Neil Diamond, yeah.
No,
So
Neil Sedaka actually. When I started the residential real estate business in the mid '80s
mhm.
in Westport, Connecticut, that's where Neil Sedaka lived, in Westport. And while I was in the business for over 20 years, and while I was in the business, he put his home on the market for sale. I didn't get the listing, but but I'd been in his house and I knew exactly the whole Old Hill area of Westport, Connecticut. But no, he was one of the one of the stars that lived in with Paul Newman. Michael Bolton also lives in Westport, and Keith Richards, of course, lives in the sister town, Weston, Connecticut, where I live most of the time in Connecticut. But yeah, it's a small world, really.
Mm. So what was childhood like for you?
I had pretty traumatic things that happened as a child. A lot of people do. My sister and I, very close. Cindy Dunaway, Dennis, our bass player in the Alice Cooper group, his wife. Uh, she and I were. Um, uh, we lived with my mom. My mom was divorced before we started elementary school, and before we started elementary school, the big uh, polio epidemic that was happening in the United States, she and I both got polio.
Oh no.
Cindy got it, and I did. My mom's a single mom, single working mom, and we're living in an apartment over my grandfather, her dad, my grandfather's house in Sharon Center, Ohio, and and we both get sick, and we're taken to the Children's Hospital in Akron, and I had the bulbar polio they call it, was in the throat. This is the one that made you stop breathing and killing a lot of kids. And when you saw the iron lung, that was the apparatus that was keeping the patients alive, keeping the kids alive. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I did a lot of research because I talk about this a little bit in the book I've been writing for 20 years, and bulbar polio is funny. All of a sudden, it'll just dissipate and go away. 2 weeks after I was in the hospital, they checked me out, and I was 100% normal, 100% cured. There's no known reason why it happened. My mother, who was pretty religious at the time, became very religious. She, of course, thought it was a miracle that I just, went through. So I was only in the hospital for 2 weeks. My sister, Cindy, I think she was in for a couple of months. She had to go through therapy. She had it in one of her legs.
Mm.
Essentially, when we went in, they told my mom I was probably going to die, and Cindy would be crippled, wouldn't be able to walk for the rest of her life properly without, like a brace or something. So we both survived. She went through therapy and walked, perfectly again for the rest. She's still raw, she's still around, and so that was pretty traumatic for us. But like a lot of kids who went to school back in the 50s, there were, kids that had deformities and a lot of people and braces on their legs from the debilitating disease, and it was traumatic. And then even after she was out and I was basically polio free, that was when Salk invented the vaccine, and there were 2 doses that were given to us in elementary school. This was a year or so after I was, you know, didn't have polio anymore, and the we took the one with the sugar cube, and then one was a vaccination and injection. So I don't want to talk to anybody about vaccines because I was in one of the worst, epidemic, whatever they call it, the polio, when as a kid, and I saw, so many of the young baby boomers at the time that were getting it and dying or become, handicapped because of it, and the only thing that did cure it was the Salk vaccine. So it was, everybody can have their own beliefs, but I was part of it, and part of it was something I had. I was so young, I probably don't remember too much about it, but I know what it did to the kids. So that was pretty traumatic, and then the other kid stuff, like, you jump up on a box to look at some livestock in a farm, and you find out that box that you just jumped up on was a beehive.
Oh
So,
no.
so I had that to deal with before, when I was really young too, and had like 100 bee stings on me. But all the time, all the while, I had like one of those little toy drum kits when I was a kid. I remember this, one of the few things I remember when my mom and dad were married. and I got it for Christmas. It's all the little toy kits, and we also were lucky enough in the early '50s to actually have a television set, and I was always glued to it. I mean, I walk in a room, I walked out of the room, I was backing out. My back was always to the other direction. My eyes were always watching the TV. I loved it. And the bass drum was laying in the floor in the middle of the room. As I was backing up one time, boom, I fell down, my ass went right into the bass drum. And so
Oh no.
I kind of wrecked the set. I mean, I was okay, but the drums were messed up. But so anyway, that was my first experience with a musical instrument with drums. But then, after that, in grade school with the percussion and everything, and I really became, I didn't even think about it. What do I want to do when I grow up? All the stuff I guess so every kid wants to be, cowboy, a sheriff, an astronaut, a fireman. I don't know, but I just kept playing music, and then later on in elementary school, started playing the snare drum, learned that for 2 years, and that's how it all began. And 2 years after I learned all the rudiments of snare drum and played in orchestra, marching band, just a snare drum, not bass drum or toms or anything. All the other things you could play in orchestra and band. Then 1961, I got a set of drums, and that was probably another biggest, life-changing things that I ever experienced. And then 2 years later, moved to Arizona with my mom and my sister. So that uh, I got to spend a lot of time on I had an aunt and uncle, my uncle Avery and Aunt Margie in Ohio that had a 500-acre dairy farm. I spent a lot of time there learning how to ride, rope, and shoot, and it was a great way to grow up. I mean, they had everything. They had cows, horses, chickens, goats, and it was a dairy farm, but 500 acres. I worked there in the summertime. Worked my ass off there in the summertime, and
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot about work ethic. And you work on a farm. Anybody that's done it, and I'm doing it with yeah, okay, I did it with family. I didn't get paid, but room and board as a kid. um you learn an awful lot, and I think that's one of the most. And my aunt Margie and my uncle Avery played every instrument. He could play a bassoon, he could play clarinet, saxophone. I mean, it was his son, my cousin Eddie, who had the snare drum that I learned to play on, and he loaned it to me. And actually, I wanted that snare drum because I thought it would be cool to have that. But somewhere in the '70s, the house that they had built had a big pond on the farm, and they had the old farmhouse had been there since the 1800s, and then they built a new ranch home. The ranch home burnt down and had all of their instruments in the house.
Oh man.
So that drum got destroyed in the fire. But I did find one exactly like it on eBay, and I bought a replica of it, and I still have that till to this day. So yeah, that was a big deal. I mean, uh, I played in a rock combo at Bucknell High School for the first time in early 1963. I think it was a New Year's Eve party or something, and that was the first time I actually played with musicians like in a rock band format, and it was life changing for me. And I didn't even think about it. I went to Arizona, Camelback High School, '63. I joined marching band, I joined orchestra, and some of the guys in the orchestra wanted to start a rock band. And I started a rock band, and that's called the Night Riders. We got a lead singer, changed the name to the Laser Beats, and boom, I'm in a rock band. And I've been in rock bands ever since.
No, I didn't get paid to work on my uncle's farm, but my mom didn't like me chewing tobacco.
Oh, there
And
you
my
go.
uncle would go and he would buy me a block of Brown's Mule,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and then I'd get a pouch of Levi Garrett and a couple of cans of Skull. He let me do whatever I wanted to out there, and we got to go squirrel hunting after we finished work for the day, so that was pay enough for me.
Yeah, we
And
went we went woodchuck hunting out there on the farm, and because if you get the hay wagon full of bales of hay, you hit one of those big woodchuck holes, you'll be reloading that wagon for the rest of the day.
Yeah,
It happened
forget
a couple
that.
of times. So they weren't too happy about the big woodchuck holes in the fields.
I didn't run into that, but we had to start bailing between 4:30 and 5,
Yeah,
and then usually it was mending the fences or whatever needed to be done.
yeah,
But to
yeah.
me, it was fun. I loved it,
Oh
and
yeah.
I
As a kid, yeah. I mean, you got tons of energy. You're
mm,
outdoors, you're in the open, and I could go target practicing anytime I wanted to, bows and
yep,
arrows or 22s, whatever we wanted. And it was like I mean, I was also part of the Boy Scouts in the Midwest in Ohio. We went camping all the time. I haven't camped now. When I moved to Arizona, I thought, oh, this would be great. Got the desert and everything. I got into the music so much, I never camped another night in my life. So after I moved there, but when I was a kid, I loved the outdoors and was out there all the time. Yeah, it was great working on the farm. Oh man, nothing better than that. And yeah, especially no school.
right. Well, for a 13-year-old to be given the keys to the truck and you could drive anywhere you wanted to out on the farm, I thought I was something.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. No, I'm with you there. No, they let me drive. I mean, getting my driver's license was the easiest things I ever did in my life because I had already driven,
Yep.
the trucks and the tractors for so many years.
Oh
Very true.
man. Heck yeah.
Got some
So,
stuff in common.
hey man, let's go do it again. I'm ready. Those things you talked about earlier, were those like the biggest hurdles you ever had in your life?
uh, Pretty much. I mean, it was a struggle, and I think that's where the work ethic came in with the band because once we all decided to, I met all the guys in '67, went to junior college together.
Mm-hmm.
66 to fall of '66 to spring of '67. May of '67, they had a band called the Naz. They went to LA. I was in a band that was like the San Francisco version of a band. We were more San Francisco, called the Holy Grail, and we went to the Bay Area. We got a house up in Berkeley, and played a few gigs up there, and the band broke up. Uh, I made my way back to LA via Phoenix, and and my buddies who were the Naz, who I went to college with, and again it was Glenn Buxton, Dennis Dunaway, Mike Bruce, and John Spear, even their drummer, and Vince Fournier, who became Malice. We I asked them if I could stay with them while I was looking for a band to join up with in the LA area, and they lived in Santa Monica at the time, and that was by then it was fall of '67, Summer of Love. Jimi Hendrix blew the Monterey Pop Festival away that summer. But uh, yeah, they said, sure, bring my drums, go over, and we're happy to give you a place to crash while you're looking for a band. While I was there, John, their drummer, still for some unknown reason to me, um, I guess they had difference of opinion on the direction to go with the music and doing singles or doing albums, but he left and went back to Phoenix, quit the band, with the Naz. I was living in the house, and this is fall of '67, and they kind of like looked at me. I mean, Glenn and I were already really good friends. We're both from Akron, Ohio. We didn't know each other there, but we met in college in Phoenix, and Glenn and Mike I was pretty close to, and they basically really, I think they pushed, said, hey, Neal's a pretty well known drummer in the Phoenix area, and playing in the other biggest band in the area, the Holy Grail, and they all decided. Dennis and Vince decided. Yeah, they asked me to join, and it took like 1/10 of a second to say yes, and that's how it started. And so the hurdles you're talking about, I think, is just that point when you make a commitment as a band, and I don't even know how bands do it anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
when you just say, okay, we're going to do everything in our power, come hell or high water, we're on the ground level to fight, claw, scratch our way to the top, blood, sweat, and tears, whatever it takes. And we start from this point.
Mm-hmm.
And making a couple trips back and forth, because when we want to make real money, we go back to Phoenix and we get paid maybe $50, $75 a show in a bar in California. We could go back and play a club in Phoenix and make $500 a night. So make 10 times as much money from one show. And so we go back and forth, make some money. And we finally made the last trip over, and we got a house in Topanga Canyon in the spring of '68, and that's on the way back to Topanga Canyon when we had that bad car accident with our van. It's amazing that we had 8 people in the van that we all survived. It was actually may have been 9 people in the van, but survived. And shortly after that, we got a new van, got our instruments repaired, and that was a tough comeback. Again, that was like, okay, are we going to keep doing this? Because now, we keep starting from, you may take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But got another van, got all the instruments repaired, keep writing all the time. And that was the other thing about the work ethic of the band. Every single day, we weren't having some major catastrophe. We were writing songs, playing gigs, or rehearsing.
Wow.
And really 24/7. We'd rest, sleep, get up the next day. We always had a rehearsal hall in the house. And the songs for Pretty's for You and Easy Action were written at that time. And Frank Zappa, we hooked up with him. He wanted to sign us. We did, but he wanted to sign us. So that obstacle, that hurdle was, we went over it, and we had a record deal. Now we had to find a manager. He wanted us to sign with Herbie Cohen, his manager. And I was I think everybody was against that, but I was very much a little bit into business and understood it. And I know that every famous band out there had their own manager. Brian Epstein managed the Beatles. Andrew Lloyd Oldham managed the Stones. And, every band had their own man. Bob Dylan had his own manager. And I wanted the same thing. I didn't want to be part of the different bands or different artists that Frank Zappa and Herbie Cohen managed. I wanted our number one. I wanted us to be number one with our management team, our management team. And again, one of those serendipitous things kind of happened. Cindy, my sister, had moved from Dallas, Texas, because by that time, my mom and sister had moved from Phoenix. So when I went to Phoenix, I either stayed with Dennis or Alice, because my mom, I didn't have a house, and I was homeless except for a band house. So my sister and mom were in Dallas, and by that time, mid '68, Cindy and I were very close, and she wanted to be closer to me, and she knew I was in the band now, and she was very familiar with the band and everything, with the Nas. And then, of course, '68, like I said, March '68, we changed our name to Alice Cooper, and that was another big step, but it wasn't really a hurdle. We just had to come up with something. And again, with like 5,000 rock bands in LA in the mid '60s, you got to do something different. You had to have your own niche. So shortly after that, we started calling Vince Alice. Go, what the hell? Name of the band's Alice Cooper. Let's call our lead singer. Alice is always cool. Whatever we want to come up with idea wise, yeah, let's do it. And so we started calling him Alice, and that was why Frank heard about a band called Alice Cooper with a lead singer called Alice. And through Miss Christine with the GTOs, we were friends with her. She took care of Moon Unit, Frank Zappa's son. So we had a link there. And that was how we got the audition. And then, so once he wanted to sign us, we were looking for a manager. Cindy was working at a boutique clothing store in Hollywood. It's called, I think, the Inside Outlet. And 2 hip-looking dudes from New York come in. She starts a conversation. They've been in several times. She finally said, introduced herself and talked to them. And she asked them what they did. They said, well, we're from New York. We manage bands. We came out to LA. and we're looking for a band to manage. So he said, well, my brother Neal is a drummer in a band called Alice Cooper that Frank Zappa wants to sign, and they're looking for a manager. So again, all the hard work and everything, and they came to see us. They wanted to sign us, and that's how that happened. And so now we had somebody to negotiate for us with a contract with Frank Zappa. It wasn't just what he was dictating to us that we would get. We could actually negotiate it.
Right.
And so we had, and they were very creative. Shep Gordon and his partner Joe Greenberg, we became like the sixth and seventh member of the band, and became very close. And then now we had record company. That hurdle was crossed. We had the band name, that hurdle was crossed, and we had our management, that hurdle was crossed. So those were, again, never stopping and never feeling like we were down and beaten, ever. We always felt like we were stars. We always felt like our first album would be a hit album, no matter what. We just saw Led Zeppelin do it, and that was because we were big fans of the Yardbirds. We knew Jimmy Page had just started a band called Led Zeppelin, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was in early '69. By that time, we were recording "Pretties for You," and so we thought we were on our way. So those were the biggest obstacles, but they're nothing that other bands haven't overcome in the past.
Right.
We were doing something so different that it was real easy to say, yeah, I want to pass on that band. When Frank Zappa is the only record company in America that liked us and got us, really understood what we were all about. Well, he said he didn't even understand us, but he liked us. And he said, this thing about you guys, not only, he said, I said, I like you, don't understand you, but the weirdest thing is, you're from Phoenix. Said, oh, you're not like from San Francisco. You're not from New York. You're not from Chicago or LA. You're from Phoenix. That doesn't make any sense. And he said, I love it. And so, I mean, when you freak out somebody who's like the number one freak out artist in the United States, Frank Zappa, we were accomplishing something. So those are really the biggest hurdles. And the same thing, like I said, every other band has. But the one thing, Kyle, in that whole conversation I'm talking about is that we stayed. Somebody had written a great review about the band's early days, and I love the word organic. We never changed from pressure from business ever. We created our own. We created ourselves. We created what Alice Cooper became. Nobody ever said, "Oh yeah, but try this," or it's our way or that. Nobody ever said that to us anywhere in our career. And not too many bands, especially bands that are put together with corporations and everything. You want the new clothes. That was one thing I hated. When I saw a band's album cover and it looked like they just bought clothes off the rack of a head shop back in the day in the '60s. I go, man, give me a break. Those clothes were not in their closet. They're like a prefab band. I just wanted us. That's why we love the raggedy clothes, because those were our clothes, man. Nobody dresses.
Right.
My sister was the one that made our clothes for us many times. So we stayed organic, and we were very lucky. We recorded "Pretties for You." Wasn't a success, but great. We got our underground following. Easy Action, same thing, not as even successful as Pretties for You, but we got to open shows with Frank Zappa, open up our audience, get a taste of concert, playing concerts. And by that time, it was time for us to leave LA, and we went on the road for a year, and then we ended up in Pontiac, Michigan. So again, 2 albums under our belt. Were we ever going to get the opportunity for a third? Many bands wouldn't,
Right.
unless you change your name and regroup. Just to, like many of the early English bands that didn't become famous, like The Move, and the lead singer, I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. He formed Electric Light Orchestra, and
Oh,
so they move on and make other groups when they don't have a success on their own. And So we were lucky to have that opportunity. And the next big obstacle that we were looking for, to follow your train of thought, was a producer.
Yeah.
Because we had not really found our producer yet with Pretty Soon Easy Action. So that's when Bob Ezrin comes into play. And that was and by that time, we were wondering what the hell we were doing. We were from Phoenix, and now we're in Detroit, Michigan. It's freezing. We're starving. We're still not making any money after 2 albums. And, do we go back to Phoenix? We can starve in Phoenix, but at least we'll be warm and we won't be freezing. So, and that pretty much ends the quest for, becoming a successful rock act. So that was the next thing. And, we hooked up with Bob, did Love It to Death, and man, the rest was really history after that. But everybody, it was always a struggle. Warner Brothers always thought every album, that was the other lucky thing. Warner Brothers, we hooked up with them after, because I think Warner Brothers and their affiliates were distributing Pretty Few and Easy Action. So we already had a foot in the door with Warner Brothers. But they released Love It to Death and had our first hit single. And it still wasn't smooth sailing, but at least we had our first successful gold album. And that was all of that work. Should we stay together? And I know every guy in the band was thinking it too. How long can we endure this? And we said, okay, it's always, we've come this far. Let's keep going. And man, Love It to Death. And when we recorded it and hooked up with Bob, and we're working with Jack Richardson. Jack Douglas was later down the line with Jack Richardson. And because he had worked with the Guess Who and had a string of hits. We wanted somebody that was a hit maker, and Jack Richardson with Nimbus 9 in Toronto, but we didn't even realize that was giving us a Canadian audience, because that's Canadian content as a Canadian producer, which will help us even, expand more into Canada, which was immensely helpful. And, it's almost like our adopted country as well as the United States. So that was a big deal. And again, it was a long time coming, a lot of work, but to get that first hit single, I'm 18, was fantastic.
And what did your mom think about the band?
Well, like I said, my mom was a big music fan,
Right.
and she was a big fan of Glenn Miller's and in the swing era. And I think, when I bought her a house after school was out, she probably really liked us then.
I just wondered her thoughts on, Alice Cooper wearing the makeup and all the crazy stuff.
No, I mean, she cared about me when I first started growing my hair long. She didn't really think anything about it. And by the time, Love It to Death, the parents had lost the battle. Since we had the longest hair of any American band totally in the United States. So, at that point, I think once the first gold album, the money talks, and nobody would ever say, I told you so, because we weren't like that. We were just like normal guys going, look, this was our concept. This is what we wanted to do. And we stuck with it through all the obstacles we just talked about, overcame them, and it became successful. Now it was just, I don't know, how long could we keep the bandwagon rolling?
Yeah, the album is KillSmith Goes West.
It's on my site. I've done a couple of online shows where we sold copies, but nealsmithrocks.com, that's my personal site. The store there, I have autographed copies that are available. Also, CD Baby downloads have been available. Neal Smith, KillSmith Goes West on Shopify and Amazon and all the major download sites on the internet. So it's available. Like I said, YouTube has all the songs. Neal Smith, KillSmith Goes West. There's 10 brand new songs that are there. on my website, I have samples of the songs as well, when you go in there, and all my discography, all the way from Release for You, like we were talking about, till to this album, KillSmith Goes West. So it's been a lot of music over 50 years, and I just can't. I'm still in shock that it's been that long. But I get emotional about it when I talk about the fans that, especially around the Hall of Fame, that when we got inducted to the Hall of Fame, and they had been with us for years, um, and my speech that night, I dedicated that award and that honor of being inducted in the Hall of Fame, which, by the way, was only about 30 miles away from where I was born in Medina Hospital, Ohio. Straight north almost is where the Hall of Fame is in Ohio. I always thought that was great. So it's right on my home turf there. But no, it was dedicated to the fans. Without them, we would have been nothing. I mean, all the stuff that been talking about, without them really getting it and being entertained, and yourself included, uh, we would have just been another struggling band in Los Angeles. And I think, like Captain Beefheart, GTOs, a lot of the bands that Frank Zappa had that never did anything. The big difference was having our own management team push us as their number one goal, and then finding our producer Bob Ezrin, and sticking with us. We had two great albums, Pretty for You and Easy Action, but commercially they weren't. They certainly weren't gold albums. I love everything we've ever done. We thought the Beatles would listen to Pretty for You and go, "Oh yeah, I get it. What a great album." Well, there were maybe 15,000 people around the country that bought it, 20,000 people, but but that was about it. But anyway, it's part of our arsenal of music. I'm proud of it. And talk about original. And anybody wants to talk about our lack of being musicians, which is probably one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. But when the original band, the Earwigs, started from the track team in Cortez High School with Dennis and Vince, Alice, and John Spear, their drummer, and Glenn Buxton, guitar. Glenn was the only one that really knew how to play guitar, but eventually their guitar player was replaced with Michael, who Michael is a great guitar player. He co-wrote all of our hit songs. Huge influence on our band. And Dennis has become an amazing bass player. And I was working at the Conservatory of Music in Akron, Ohio, on expanding my percussion knowledge right up to the time I left Ohio for Arizona. So there's a lot of music talent in that band. When you listen to Pretties for You, you just don't realize how difficult those songs are. And we did it without writing down. There's no music charts at all. It was all up here. We had to memorize everything. So that was why I was really happy finally by the song Halo of Flies on the Killer album, which is still one of my favorite songs. That blew the hell out of everybody that ever said that band can't play music. I'm going, wow. If they don't like the makeup, they don't like the violence on the stage. I mean, yeah, we killed our singer. All right, big deal. And keep picky. But if you want to put it on, you can't put it on the music. It was too damn good. It was creative and original. And like I said, it was organic. Nobody ever came in and told us, what to play. Bob Ezrin was a great arranger. That's what Bob helped us with. He arranged the songs, all the music we came up with. He added some wonderful sweetening parts here and there, especially in songs like on the Killer album, Dead Babies. Eventually, I Love the Dead on some of the album. I mean, you hear the orchestration, the classical music that's in there. I mean, he just was amazing at arranging those parts. But the parts all originated, from Michael and Dennis and myself and Glenn, musically. And Alice wrote some great songs too. I think Second Coming, Alice wrote himself on guitar. I remember we lived in Pontiac, Michigan, and Alice and I had the two bedrooms upstairs. And I heard him, playing that song. He had one of the double horn Dan electro guitars, the old ones, and he had that in the bedroom and in the other room, and I could hear him playing that song, and we'd work on that together occasionally. But yeah, music. I mean, it was always about the music. The music to me was it wasn't the theatrics that was the foundation. It was the music that we built the theatrics on, and like no other band. I mean, you could say the Doors were a little bit theatrical, and they were great music, great lyrics theatrically, but we just took it one more step to let's do a show. Let's put on a show. Let's make the songs come to life. And we're big horror, all the genres of the early movies.
Well, you got some notoriety for your drum work on Billion Dollar Babies.
Well, I mean, that became my signature song. And that was another great story. A buddy of ours, Rock and Reggie, was a close friend of the band, would stay at the house, the Cooper Mansion in Greenwich. He was a good friend of Glenn's, and he's a buddy of ours from Detroit. And he's singer songwriter, and he had a song. We started jamming around with it anyway while we're doing the Billion Dollar Baby album, and that song became the song Billion Dollar Babies. It went through a few generations and changed, and almost probably not noticeable from the original song. And by that time, it's like we're talking about KillSmith Goes West. The lyrics start to tell you where to go in the direction. And we had the idea all the way back to Pretty's for You, and then Loved It Up, of course, with Caught in a Dream. My Billion Dollar Babies, we were in that dream. We were caught in that dream. And so now we were going to talk about the success of it, the little brats that we were, and we're going to talk about that we made it. It's not fuck you everybody, but kind of fuck you all the critics. And so we came up with the concept Billion Dollar Babies, and that song we started jamming on it, putting it together. And Alice started writing the lyrics, as he always did. Even when we brought in our own songs, he would either take the existing lyrics and then add on to them. I mean, that was his job in the band, and he always did that. And did it great. I think Alice is a great lyricist, and still to this day, he every time he's got a second, he's reading. He reads all the time. He consumes so much knowledge with lyrics and words. It's great, and you see him come out in the music. But we were jamming on the song in rehearsal, and I had pretty much a straight beat to Billion Dollar Babies. And being a big fan of the early Rolling Stones with Brian Jones, I always liked Hey You Get Off My Cloud with Charlie's real simple boom. I'm not going to sing it because everybody, if you don't like the early Stones, the song Hey You Get Off My Cloud. But I thought it was really cool and perfect for the song. But I wanted to do something. I'm a rudiment drummer. That's why I spent 2 years learning all the rudiments on snare drum before I got a complete set of drums. And so I'm always big on flams. I had done You Drive Me Nervous on the Love It to Death album. It's pretty much I play flams all the way through the song. I still do it to this day. I still, pick my rudiments out. And so I thought for the beginning of Billion Dollar Babies, I wanted to do something flashy, but was very rudimental. And that's where I came up with the intro. And then to do sort of a little sporadic, almost like a tango, bum, 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 bum on the chorus of Billion Dollar Babies instead of playing through it. And so I started working with it, and Bob said, "Okay, Neal," because I was playing a street beat before that, and he liked it. And he said, "Go ahead and do it, but when you record it, you better do it perfect." Well, I did do it perfect. And if you recall, and I like to remind everybody that back then, drummers had to do the drum track on albums perfectly. It wasn't like today where you can just drop it in and punch it in. If you make a mistake somewhere, you can go back and clean it up. You can do that digitally, and it's seamless these days. But back then, every single album that we did as Alice Cooper through the greatest hits, I played the beginning of the song that you hear all the way to the end of the song, and there was only one song that I remember. I don't know if it was Under My Wheel, but one of them that there was something in the middle, and Bob was so good. He did splice one together. There is one song of all those songs on 7 or 8 albums that I did. But anyway, so I do pride myself, but I'm not the only one. Everybody, Danny in Chicago, Keith Moon, all the drummers had to, had to do that. So, but I mean, it came out great. It came out as one of the flashiest songs for the $1 Billion Baby tour. And at that time, I was like spinning my sticks, real baton twirl sticks, not this through your finger bullshit, this spinning. I always hated that because it's such a cheesy way to do it, but most drummers do it. It looks cool, but I know it ain't the real deal. But that song I could flash out on, and still to this day, it's very, very seldom do I ever hear a drummer play it perfectly.
Wow. Now, the website is once again
NealSmithRocks.com. And don't forget, I spelled my name correctly, NealSmithRocks.com. Yeah.
And do you have social media?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. And again, it's Neal Smith Rocks on Facebook. Instagram, I think it's Neal Smith Rocks too, but it's not too hard to find. I just went on Instagram recently, but on all of these things, I have my latest videos on there. But the website is really, it has my videography, my discography, everything I've done in my whole life. I just had it rebuilt last year by a company out of New York. Matter of fact, it's the same website company that does Alice's website, and they're very, very good. I don't work with them. I have a webmaster that, I don't even have a cell phone. That's that I could do a Zoom interview on or anything. I have a simple, consumer cellular cell phone. I make calls and get calls, and that's it. I don't take pictures with my camera, and I don't take pictures with my cell phone. So, but that's the best way to always see the latest stuff that I'm working on. Like I said, I'm working on the next KillSmith album now. Alice and Dennis and Michael and I continue as we did before the Hall of Fame to get in the studio occasionally to write some songs with Alice, and there's been actually about 8 songs now that we've recorded on the last 3 Alice albums: Welcome to My Nightmare, Paranormal, and Detroit Stories. And Social Debris off the Detroit Stories was a song that I started writing, and Alice and I started working on it in 2016. When I got my winter home in Arizona, went out there I had enough with the snow. I'm gonna give a shout. I see you got my buddy Alex Ziwak. You have his picture back there on your wall. I'm gonna give a shout out to Alex. He's a good friend of mine. We get together occasionally, and we did a movie together a couple of years ago. That's that movie, Desolation Angels. That's on my website too. It's on YouTube. You can look it up. It didn't exactly make the Golden Globe or the Academy Awards, but it was it was a hell of a fun project, and great to get to meet Alex. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's awesome, and y'all can check out the interview I did with him. It is on my channel. But
Cool.
Man, I could sit here all day because the history alone is fascinating to me. But will you come back when the next album comes out? Because I'd love to talk about it.
I'd love to chat again, Kyle. No, absolutely, man. It's a pleasure, and it's great to get to talk about some of the things we normally don't talk about in interviews. But I just appreciate the opportunity to always, communicate with the fans and maybe get some new ones. And if you're not a fan of the music and maybe you like a little country, check out KillSmith Goes West on YouTube or my site at NealSmithRocks.com, and maybe find something you enjoy. And I'm working on my next KillSmith album, and it'll be another adventure, maybe in a little bit more, a little bit different direction. Who knows?
Well, I'm going to put all those links in the description so people can just click on it, go straight to it, and make it easy for them. But Neal, man, thank you so much for coming on my show. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I also want to tell all of you out there, first off, if you're new to the channel, I hope you'll come back, hit that subscribe button. And for my regulars, you guys rock because you make it possible for me to do this. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.